Hey, what's up, Heavy Metallurgy? It's Logan, the Metal and Beer Snob here, and it's November out there. It's getting dark sooner, it's cold out, people are already getting snow. I think it's the perfect time to break out some doom metal. And for this iteration of the Heavy Metallurgy review series, I've got a borderline funeral doom album for you. This is the collaborative effort between Bellwitch and Aerial Ruin, the Stygian Bough Volume 2. Stay tuned. So yes, for a lot of people, Bellwitch have become quite the household name in the doom subgenre, and especially in the funeral doom subgenre. But I don't know if their collaborative effort with Aerial Ruin has garnered quite the same level of interest. As I mentioned, this is their second one, Stygian Bough Volume 2. And this one is coming out on November 14th via Profound Lore. So first, let's dive in a little bit more to each band. As I already said, Bellwitch have really garnered a lot of interest and conversation really ever since their breakthrough album 2017's Mirror Reaper. They've been on the scene releasing great stuff since even their demo back in 2011. Pictured right here. I'm a big fan of this 40-minute demo. Not brief, these guys. And then, of course, they started their run of records with Longing, which was released in 2012 on Profound Lore. So they've been a Profound Lore band this whole time. Then we got Four Phantoms in 2015, followed by the breakout album 2017's Mirror Reaper, which I am indeed a big fan of. We got the CD. Got it on record just in case. I could use a long sleeve shirt of it for these, November days and nights. And then that artwork is so cool, I needed a flag. So yes, for a lot of people, Mirror Reaper is their introduction to the band and is still the band's high watermark. And the band, they haven't struggled, but they've gone a couple different directions since Mirror Reaper's release. For example, we have the first iteration of this collaboration with Aerial Ruin in 2020, Stygian Bough Volume 1, another amazing piece of artwork. And then another proper full-length, this came out in 2023, Future's Shadow Part 1, The Clandestine Gate. So like Mirror Reaper, this is also a one-song album clocking in at 83 minutes. Bellwitch, of course, kind of have another claim to fame for being a two-piece band, just a drummer and a bassist. We have Dylan Desmond on bass and vocals and Jesse Schreibem on drum and vocals, and also organ. From these two, a massive funeral doom sound takes hold, and it's really something to witness, both on record and in the alive environment. So a little bit about Aerial Ruin now, just to get it out of the way. I'm not as familiar with this project. It's just a solo project by Erik Moggridge, and really it's a neo-folk project that has kind of been around since the 2010s, started around the same time as Bellwitch. I have not really listened to any of Erik's solo outings, so I cannot really comment on it. I will say Aerial Ruin is not on the archives officially outside of this collaboration with Bellwitch. But from what I can tell, he's released 4 proper albums under the Aerial Ruin name. So apparently this initial collaboration started back in 2012 with Bellwitch's debut Longing, and that's when the idea of Erik and the band kind of started to take shape. And I guess it took a couple years for them to get up and running. So now a quick little bit about my relationship with this band, because I do think that where you came in to this band and what your opinion of their discography is will kind of help shape how you feel about this upcoming collaboration. As I said, Mirror Reaper was my first album, and I was absolutely blown away. I mean, you saw all the different versions of it I have, and I just kind of personally connected with that album. I mean, it's a heavy album. The passing of initial drummer Adrian Guerra is a pivotal piece of that album, and kind of the emotional weight of it. And over the 80-minute runtime that this one song undergoes, you're really brought on this full journey of self-actualizing your grief and kind of really just introspectively looking inward and feeling kind of connected with a very raw core that lurks within us all. And I think that was the goal and the purpose of Mirror Reaper, and for me it worked, and it's one of my all-time favorite albums, and I hold it on a very high pedestal, which of course meant that their proper follow-up, Clandestine Gate, couldn't live up to the hype. For me, this album did not really connect with me at all, and I really haven't revisited it at all since it came out, even, in preparation for this video. There's something about revisiting an album that's 83 minutes long and only one track that is really tough if you're not fully motivated in doing so. And for me, I've enjoyed pieces of it when I've listened to it in the past, but it felt like they were trying to recreate Mirror Reaper just a little bit too much, down to certain riffs that would be played and certain ways they would build the track. And it felt like it was trapped in the shadow of this monumental album, and it could not escape. This was not one of my favorite albums from the band. On the flip side, the Stygian Bough release, Volume 1, immediately connected with me for some reason. And this was released a couple years directly after Mirror Reaper, so really this is more of a proper follow-up than Clandestine Gate. For some reason I had no issue connecting with this, and I think it's because this is not Mirror Reaper. On Stygian Bough, they're not trying to recreate the same vibe and feel of it. And the presence of Erik being here really made this feel like something different. There's a bit more of a folk vibe on this release, and there's actual guitars here, for example. Like there's acoustic guitar, there's electric guitar, the riffs feel different, the tone of the album somehow feels calmer, not quite as dark, but still massive in a very introspective kind of way. So going into Stygian Bough Volume 2, I had a similar question, like, was I going to enjoy it as much as the first one, or was it going to try to recreate the same high points and atmosphere and feel of the first one, but then be a lesser version of it? So this was kind of my main question going into Stygian Bough Volume 2. So the first thing I realized is that on Stygian Bough Volume 2, they do stay in the lane that they carved for themselves in the first. This is indeed a collaboration. The main voice throughout this album is once again Erik from Aerial Ruin, and the folk passages and acoustic guitar is still heavily relied on throughout this album. There's also solely clean vocals, which is a slight change up from the previous. On Volume 1, they bring in that just nasty funeral doom guttural towards the end of the closing track. But here, it's clean the whole way through. And honestly, I didn't end up minding that. They've committed to it. They make Erik's voice work. He has more of a delicate and somber, almost sing-songy voice that balances out how melodious yet still heavy this album is. Like, it does all tie in and fit. And I think if they were to try to utilize the guttural vocals, it would potentially be distracting from the atmosphere they're trying to create. So I'm okay that they stayed in this lane and even pushed the gutturals out completely. Another way they benefit from kind of copying Volume 1 is there are actual individual tracks here. We've got 4 songs, and within each song are individual movements that start, build, and climax towards the end. But then they themselves all are kind of building on the album, so the album still feels like it's building throughout. But I think it works well that these individual songs can be alone, can stand on their own and be their own individual journeys. And that was one of the ways that Stygian Bough Volume 1 succeeded that even Mirror Reaper failed at. Is Mirror Reaper only works if you're in the mood for listening to one long 80-minute song. It is quite the investment. But here, you don't have to, and it's better for that. And the same is true for Volume 1. There are some differences, though. Minor tweaks, if you will, but I think they make a difference in the big picture of how I feel about this album. It feels like a natural progression from Volume 1. As I said, they change up certain things. There are no guttural vocals here. There are no standalone acoustic folk songs either. On Volume 1, there was a 12-minute track, Heaven Torn Low, The Passage, was just all acoustic, all clean-sung vocals. On Volume 2, each track features its own individual journey, and some of them will have acoustic, folky passages, but they will all incorporate the guitar and actual slow funeral doom marches and dirges throughout. So they'd really try to incorporate the Aerial Ruin and Bell Witch sound a bit more seamlessly. And one of the feelings that I get after listening to this album is that it feels like a refinement of that funeral doom and that folk influence, and a true cohesion of the sound, versus where on the previous one, Volume 1, at times it felt like they could be pulling each other apart. Here, they're perfectly accenting each other. One of the bigger change-ups, I think, is how much more dominant Erik's guitar work is. There really is a focus on these strong lead moments from Erik where his guitar is just shining, basically. He has this beautifully bright guitar tone, which still sounds incredibly heavy. He uses this really as a weapon on each one of these 4 tracks towards the end to give you that driving and powerful climax. He even utilizes some guitar solos and impressive lead work from time to time. And all in all, these guitar lines just do wonder to push the album forward. If there's any downside, the elephant in the room is you have to like Bell Witch. This is not going to convert anyone to being a Bell Witch fan. You have to be okay with the sound being a little meandering, them taking their time to build these tracks for 12, 15, 19 minutes for the closer, and you have to be okay with these clean-sung vocals from Erik. And if this is not your kind of music, this is definitely not going to be your kind of album. I mean, I kind of consider Bell Witch to be a somewhat divisive band. You'll meet people like myself who are kind of head over heels for them, probably talk about them too much. And then in the same token, you'll meet people who kind of hate on them too much. What I do know is that it is great to have new music from these guys, and this does show Bell Witch and Aerial Ruin in a different light from Volume 1, and definitely for Bell Witch, it's different from Clandestine Gate. And for that, I'm thankful, and I know I will return to this. But before I kind of wrap it up, let's talk about some individual songs and those big moments that I was talking about. So 4 songs over the span of 58 minutes, which is good. We're below an hour. I think that's a good sign for me. And I'm a big fan of the final 3 tracks. Track 2, King of the Wood, really starts to pick up the pace as much as you can for a Funeral Doom song. But it does a good job of introducing the interplay between these doomy Funeral Doom sections and the acoustic parts. And it feels natural and it feels balanced. And then you get to that final third of the track, and that's when Erik just lets loose his phenomenal guitar work, and to great effect. He has this guitar line that just gets stuck in your head and feels powerful and driving, and it really carries out the last section of the song. And from here, this is kind of the trend for the next two tracks. From Dominion, Let Them Bleed is the shortest on the album at only 11 minutes and 5 seconds. It might be my favorite song on the album. It, to me, feels the most emotionally impactful. The guitar really does do a great job of creating some atmosphere towards the end, and it just feels chilling as it's building up to that final melodious guitar line. And then the final track, the epic 19-minute long closer, The Told and the Leadened, is just a suitable final send-off for this album. It's, of course, the longest, but I think it pays off. It kind of does what everything that the album was doing up to this point, but in a bigger fashion. Like, the acoustic section is a bit longer here. It's a bit more heartfelt from Erik. And then the final climax is just epic. There's this like guitar solo that doesn't feel like it belongs on a Funeral Doom album. Like, I want it to go to a heavy metal release and kind of chill out there if it could. But here it works. And one of the strengths of this album, as I said, is that guitar tone. It just sounds so heavy and so cool in this setting with this amount of melody behind it. And then you get to the final outro, which is kind of a drum solo. And it's a very like plodding and building solo that takes you to the final climactic section. So easily one of the best moments on this track and a great way to end the album. And then to briefly touch on the opener, Waves Become the Sky. It's not a bad song, but it ends up being kind of forgettable because of the high points that come after. And it's not the one that makes me want to revisit this album. But it does benefit from being the first track on the album. For whatever reason, I'm a bit more forgiving of it because I know, like, after it, that's when the pay dirt kind of hits. And to me, when it comes to staying interested in an album like this, you want the middle of the album, the second half of the album, to be more engaging and impactful for the listener. So the fact that it has a strong finish easily makes up for a blunder kind of in the beginning. So yes, I am still digesting this album and figuring out how I feel about it. I know I like it, but it's a heavy investment. So just know that going in. I will say, as a Bellwitch fan, I am not disappointed, and I appreciate that they tweaked certain elements from Stygian Bough Volume 1 while at the same time honing and amplifying other parts of that formula. So if you are a Bellwitch fan or a fan of this style of music that has patience and enjoys a bit of introspection and beauty in your Funeral Doom, I would highly recommend checking out Stygian Bough Volume 2. As I said, it comes out November 14th via Profound Lore. Go pick it up, support the band, and support Heavy Metallurgy. Watch more reviews. Check out the Friday night show with Alan and Marty. That happens every Friday. And of course, the album club that I'm a part of with Kellen from Killing for Company Marty and Jim from Iowa's Recordings. Happens every Wednesday. Until the next time, though, cheers.